This is a continuation of the video I did a week back maybe, on the fact that I think that the situation we're in is primarily because there have been a large number of abused children that are taking their revenge. This could be, this is not restricted to an age. This could be could be. This is cross-generational. And I think I, I feel I need to continue on this because to my small clan of YouTube followers, the people of conscience, my clan of conscience, God, I love people of conscience who are dedicated to doing the right thing and continuously to understand and learn what it means to do the right thing, because it's not a black and white issue quite often, although our response, I think in our deepest selves, we have this knowledge, this innate knowledge, which includes, and our success is predicated on doing the right thing. We cannot continue if we do the wrong things. It's like the curly-haired guy, Einstein guy, said, you're doing the same thing over and over to expect a different outcome is mental illness. Well, in this case, I think it's not true, because you do the same thing over and over to do the right thing, you actually become sane. So I know the way it was spoken, how he spoke it, that to do the wrong thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I'm saying to do the right thing over and over again is in fact our only hope of sanity and salvaging something within ourselves. So it's a continuation of this idea that the circumstances we're in is fundamentally caused by the inordinate large number of abused and traumatized children that are taking revenge. This seems, one would say, well, there are so many stop measures in between us and accomplishing certain things. And it's not like the idea that there is a kingpin, although I wouldn't discount the idea that there is a kingpin. And before I continue, I have to remind myself the kingpin. This is Vitruvian Man. Vitruvian Man is the symbol of the star, the five-pointed star, representing a state of perfection, as Da Vinci used. He used, Vitruvian was, I think Vitruvius was the person who designed this, who had this concept, and Da Vinci took it, like he took a lot of other things, a very clever character who produced a huge number of weapons of mass destruction for the Count of Milano for 20 years. That's how he made his money. Da Vinci made his money not being a painter, an artist that produced beautiful, valuable artworks. He also had talent in that regard. But he made his money on producing weapons of mass destruction for the Count of Milan. It kind of ruins his karma as far as I'm concerned. And I don't have a very high regard even for brilliant people who use their brilliance to create suffering. Anyway, it's a sideline. All right, so the idea of a kingpin is not necessarily in place from the way I understand this, our reality as it unfolds. So there is, in many people's minds, when you listen to really well researched presenters, like, for example, Corbett Report, who totally missed the Fukushima event, by the way. He has not realized. He even lives in Japan on the sunny west side, he says. I find this quite extraordinary for a person to have such insights, and this will reflect again in my comment now when I say some of these people who have such phenomenal insights but can't help themselves on a fundamental level. And not sure if he was an abused child. Well, we're all traumatized in some way in our history. If you listen to Gabor Mate talk about this, he has through personal experiences, come to certain conclusions about trauma and how trauma affects our lives from beginning to end. And this is in formative years, especially when we're younger. And it doesn't mean that you're being roasted on a spittle and left for dead and you recover. No, these are incremental traumas, fears that just sort of root themselves in our being and seem to be difficult to extract or to come to terms with. We can even understand it to a very large extent, but still not be still be under the influence of those traumatic events, and then addictions occur. And Mate talks about addictions, The Hungry Ghost, one of his books, and it sort of sets a backdrop for why it is we're in the situation we're in, that collectively, as this proceeds, or not proceeds, but collectively is almost ritualistically reproduced through institutions. And I think this is one of the great arguments, or for me personally, I think that civilization basically is this institutionalized or ritualized abuse that continues. It's codified. It's endorsed. It's kind of a coming of age. You need to be part of this system of abuse in order to have any function in society. And this is, like I say, a continuation of the idea that the circumstances we're in with this beer virus is basically, and beer virus, I'm meaning the population generally, the state that the fear the population has, comes out of this feeling of abuse and not having any alternative, that we feel there is a way out in some way. This is so important to feel. People talk about hope and say that it's meaningless. Au contraire, I find that that sense of a hope that is grounded in a real sense of self. This is something like, our circumstances may be difficult, but a sense of self that gives us hope is actually really important. I don't discard that whatsoever. It's not like we're out in the trenches as the enlightened beings. We work towards it. So I was listening, I was thinking about the sequence of events over the last, let's say, 100 years, and let's take the Industrial Revolution. And now the bastards have coined a new phrase, the fourth Industrial Revolution. And you can research this. It's basically connected to a kind of a reconfiguration of our biosphere, of our own biology in terms of AI and chipping and all that kind of stuff. So this fourth industrial revolution is fundamentally, or was fundamentally, designed by these abused children. And this is the sort of vision that a person has of the future, that basically, as I say quite often, extracts the soul, takes the soul out of us. This is very essential, that if you shift into a mechanistic vision of existence and the universe, that it's just like a sort of lumbering robot idea, that guy said, the proclaimed atheist fellow, that we're just lumbering robots, like machines or cogs in a complex network of many cogs, and we fit in, and something gets broken in the machine and you replace it and fix it that way. Well, this is a vision that will end in our complete and utter destruction, because that's what happens to machines. They break down and they completely fail. So be careful what you wish for. If this is in fact, Dawkins was his name, if this is in fact what you believe or think is true, it will happen. This is quite unfortunate. It's not where you can say, well, it's superseded by the brilliance of the design by the omnipotent being. Frankly, there has been that idea of a free will, so I think that comes into play, where we find that the things we think about or our way of thinking will actually result in what it is that we experience. So if these traumatized children have designed a vision for our future, it is guaranteed to fail miserably and badly, and whatever is left, I don't want to go through that type of a suffering. I have my own experiences and traumas to deal with, but I feel confident that I can come up with a better version of myself as I proceed through my life experiences, that by the time I'm done, I've left the world a better place rather than contributing to this feeling of an inevitable demise. And I think this is built in. When people attach themselves to the traumatized aspect of their lives, it becomes more and more self-replicating, self-feeding, this kind of Stockholm syndrome. Even we attach ourselves to people that propagate this notion of trauma and fear, creating the next vision of the world. So this fourth industrial revolution is predicated on passing on the maximum amount of hurt and suffering. This is my conclusion, because it's a kind of revenge thing that's happening. If we don't see this and just see it as, well, we can choose or not choose, there is no choice here. We really don't have a choice. We can't say to ourselves, well, just let it go on and it'll solve itself, resolve itself. Yeah, well, of course it'll resolve itself. But the amount of suffering that is attached to this kind of worldview, this fourth industrial revolution, is going to it's going to be staggering for generations. And, as far as I'm alive and I understand this through, I don't know why, I just have an innate understanding that this is so wrong, that when you abandon what is our inner selves, the deepest part of our self understanding something is right and something is wrong, when this is abandoned for some external decree or force or whatever, this is when we go mucky-muck and things start to break down. And fear is the foundation. Fear is the foundation caused by trauma. And this is now quite important to the orchestration. The levels of fear need to be escalated to such an extent. The terrorist kind of narrative didn't work enough. It was a buildup. But the beer virus now has captured the imagination of all traumatized children. Created by the traumatized children who are now in their 80s or 90s even, and they go right through. It's generational. This sensibility in a person to experience trauma starts very early and goes right till the end if it's never addressed. This is why Gabor Mate, I think, is so important. And if you take a Canadian intellectual, Gabor Mate obviously is a mindful person thinking, but somebody like Jordan Peterson, who Gabor Mate has identified as expressing within his ideas this brain on legs kind of feeling of unresolved rage caused by the trauma that he went through personally. Mate has identified this correctly because he speaks from experience. I'm just giving this as an example of two Canadians, one I look up to and one I say is very problematic. No matter what people say, he inspires them. Jordan Peterson inspires me to clean up my room or whatever it is. There is a huge disconnect in people I see a disconnect when attaching ourselves to traumatized people like Peterson. This is a mistake. It doesn't mean you can't draw some value out of it, but it's a mistake. It's fundamentally giving into this sense of it's like a hopelessness that takes hold within us because we are traumatized and we don't want to deal with the things that we need to deal with. This is what Mate basically is saying. Unless we actually deal with our personal traumas and transform ourselves, we're going to attach ourselves to all the wrong people. Anyway, Jordan Peterson would be a highly placed cog in this machine, as far as I'm concerned, in this fourth industrial revolution, appearing to be somehow still connected to a biology, to a history of being a biological being, but he is actually, in his entire manner, in his being, transforming himself much more into this artificial person rather than a real person. And one of the indications, I didn't know this, I had this suspicion before he was identified, having been, he was an addict. He was an addict, and Gabo Mate says the fact that you're an addict, what it is that you're trying, the point is, what is it that you're trying to cover up with the addiction? The addiction itself gives temporary pleasures or a sense of well-being, but the consequences of those pleasures are quite dire, as we see with somebody like Peterson, who was an addict, who has not faced his demons, his traumas, his problems, and is displacing it by temporarily feeling a sense of euphoria. Well, it came back to bite him in the ass big time, and people are still, well, you wish him well, but I also wish that he just disappears off the popular radar screen. The guy has had phenomenal following, and Gabo Mate is no slouch. He has a following, but nothing like Jordan Peterson. So my point is, what I wanted to talk about today, a continuation of the sense of trauma that grips us, and in a way, this is something that is disturbing to me, and I'm coming more and more. I've made references to this. The idea that through a solid analysis or understanding or finding all the facts around our circumstances and exposing them, exposing the bastards. I love being a contrarian and saying this is wrong. There is value in this. But if we analyze and understand without a commitment, what I talk about quite often in terms of finding our own inner strength, that calling, something that really gives me a sense of purpose, all the analysis and knowledge in the world will not create wisdom. It will just, fall like a fruit off a tree and just wither. It needs to be harvested. This somehow or other, it needs to be harvested. It cannot just be a continuous reproduction of this regurgitation of the things we all really know. I don't discard it, but I say it's a very low priority. What is a much higher priority is what I want to explore, some countermeasure to the things that don't work. And this is something that I've realized ever since Fukushima. It's sort of the feeling of helplessness when these monumental events occur. And there will be many more, I think, because the infrastructure now is in place of ultimate fear and trauma that is evident of the people walking around with masks. I see them driving in their own cars by themselves with masks on. These are well documented examples. People have talked about this quite a long time already, so for months and months. This is not something new I'm presenting, but it represents this extensive level of fear, and it has caught on because people were traumatized and never were able to deal with that trauma. So the bastards have figured this out. I mean, they're not. In fact, they relish in their trauma by recreating rituals, and this gets very dark, especially around children and the vulnerable, where the suffering of others reinforces, I suppose, a sense of, it's a justification for the trauma that I would feel. To inflict that suffering on others will reinforce or justify my own trauma, rather than dealing with it, rather than saying, okay, got to draw a line in the sand, and I'm not going to step across this line. I'm going to do the right thing. What is it going to take? What is it going to take for a person to actually make that commitment to resolving this? And it's got to happen personally. And I just want to do a side note here. What I've been witnessing in an organization called The Line International, I think it was out of Toronto, who started with a very small contingent of people meeting in protest to the medical decrees, the unlawful medical decrees that are being used in order to instill the fear. These people are phenomenal now. I was watching, it's nearby. I hope to be able to go and support this movement, the Line International, who started out with dozens of people protesting. Last Saturday, yesterday, they were broadcasting from Dundas Square in Toronto, and there were probably close to 5,000 people. So over a period of a short period of time, like 2-3 months that they've existed, they're establishing a strong foothold. This is also very hopeful. I find these people phenomenal, and the platform they give to all types, from the religious groups to the atheists to activists to even students, teenagers, to the minorities, whoever, they give a platform to anyone and that is committed to exposing this fraud, this beer virus fraud, and standing up for themselves. People standing. This is phenomenal. I love this. I think this is incredible. And this is a way to, in terms of recognizing something within ourselves where we become effective, that once this knowledge has settled in, we need to act on it in some way. And the actions in this case happen to be a concerted effort to protest, to let others know it doesn't need to be this way. So I look at this and I'm encouraged because it gives me an example of people acting their conscience, acting out of something where they say, no, I'm not going to stand by and just wait and see how this unfolds, because this is unfortunately the tendency that people sit back and say, well, I'll just watch and see how this unfolds, and when the time comes, I'll be ready to jump on board. It doesn't work that way. The longer we stay on the outside of something, the more passive we become in terms of our own personal transformation. Like knowing something, it's called cognitive dissonance. This has been explained, and it creates another form of trauma where you're trying to hold two opposing ideas. Don't do it. This is going to create enormous disconnects within oneself. I felt this disconnect when I say to myself, well, I can just stand by and watch it. I don't have to do anything. As soon as I'm aware that I'm compelled in some way to act a different way, the right way, and don't do anything about it, it creates this cognitive dissonance. Research it, figure it out yourself. It's not a good idea. So watching other people do what you know you want to, or you are inclined to be a part of, do it. It's not a good idea. Whichever way you decide to do that, it's an important step. It may not be easy, but it's an important step, commitment to follow. So I'll end it here. This fourth industrial revolution is basically a design by the abused children, and we need to resolve that personal trauma in order to be a counter to this. We cannot let this just roll over us like all these mask-wearing hysteria types who basically ritualized their trauma and said it's okay. It's okay to feel fear and trauma because everybody else does. And the orchestrators of this has figured this out. They know exactly how this dynamic in a human being works. The Goebbels of this world understood, these people that propagated world views understood how to tap into trauma. And that's what's happening. And on the worst of the worst are actually reinforcing themselves by going through rituals of this sacrifice on all different levels. to the point of blood sacrifice and all of this. I'm sure this exists. I am sure this is out there, especially since millions of children are missing. Where'd they go? Where did they go? Where did they go? Oh, they're having a life under a bridge or somewhere. No, they're being abducted. They're being abused and abducted for this feeling, this perverse feeling of satisfaction, delighting in the pain and suffering of others. This is what's happening. This is it's happening in front of our eyes right now. The mask wearing is part of that. So join, if you're Canadian and in your Toronto, show up. Show up at the Saturday. Every Saturday at noon, the people are meeting and showing their resolve not to go along with these extraordinary draconian measures that are going to increase. And I said in my last video, I identified, or I related it to a similar experience that has happened previously, which is called East Germany, where a bunch of hoods and bullies took over the place. And by the time they were done, 90% of the people ended up working on their behalf, working as snitches and tattletales and you name it, snitching on their neighbors. 90%, the documents are there. 90% of the population ended up giving into their trauma and just going along. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because I understand this personally as well, having to overcome a certain trauma. And I don't know if it's ever completely, I hope it is, to be completely free of all the fear that was caused by the trauma. And it probably can be done within a level of solitude. This is also my last point. How do we proceed once we understand that there are certain things that need to be resolved within ourselves and transform ourselves? And I've said quite often, I mean, the fundamental notion of this transformation comes from doing the right thing on every level, but also the ability to find some kind of expression. It doesn't matter what it is, from cooking to gardening, to making a picture, to being a speaker, to even making presentations on YouTube. Whatever that sort of innate power that is released to the outside world, to the external world, once it's resolved within, or as it's being resolved within, it also wants to externalize itself. This is crucial. This is crucial for me that you do this. This is something that will help me become a better person. This is something that is passed on. It's just because we're all connected, I guess. It's how it works. We're all connected. So I know it may seem kind of redundant. I talk about this. I really appreciate being able to say the things, even if I repeat myself. There's nothing wrong with repeating the right thing. I have no problem listening, and I would never tell a person to stop doing that unless it's just something that allows them to hide from themselves. Like they repeat a certain thing that is clearly something that keeps them stuck in a certain mode. Like I don't want to do that. But I don't think this is the case when I talk about this, because I feel liberated when I'm able to express this, and whether I express it verbally, and it's not maybe as powerful as when I do it through painting. And in a painting, the beauty of a painting is that it has a way of communicating with me, and obviously with you. You have interpretations and responses that are independent of what I'm feeling, but just as an exercise of understanding when there is the right circumstance on a surface. Like, it's phenomenal. It's like, I don't understand this really, but a painting is a metaphor for understanding the rightness of something. And we see it clearly. I mean, it hits us like a ton of bricks, whether it's in a piece of music, or whether it's in a visual, whatever it is, or whether it's in a flower that has, in the middle of winter, you have like a flower that emerges in the cold, and I love that. It's just so right. Anyway, let's find the rightness of things.